Welcome, everyone, to the Coin Bureau podcast. I'm here with my good friend, Mad Mike Mooch.
Woo!
I'm doing the intros today, and my name is, of course, Guy. And in this episode, Mike, you requested it, so we're going to do it.
What's the matter with you?
What is the matter with you? We're going to talk about the Metaverse.
Yeah.
Because this is what you asked for at the end of the last episode.
I think we kind of parlayed into it sort of quite well. We were talking about it on the last episode, and we touched on it, and I went, right, well, why don't we talk a bit more about that? Because it's something that's had a lot of buzz around it at sort of the end of last year, carried on into this year, and then obviously interest in crypto has kind of dipped a little bit when the market dips. But I think it's something that is coming back. I think there's so many companies investing so much money into it, and it's kind of a subject that I would like to get a bit more of an understanding of.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're absolutely right, because it's one of the word metaverse, I think, is something that probably everyone has heard several times by now, and yeah, I mean, you summed it up really well. It's something that's gathering steam. And it's being talked about more and more. And yeah, interest in it, I think, has waned recently. And this is kind of because the metaverse isn't purely a crypto thing.
No.
But we are, obviously, because we are a crypto-focused podcast, we are going to talk today about how, where crypto and the metaverse meet, and, why they are, in my opinion, very well suited to each other. But I think that's an important point to get off on, is that the metaverse is kind of, it's a lot more than crypto. But it's certainly, the two are getting mentioned kind of more and more in the same breath.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a concept that's gathering a lot of steam, also attracting a lot of cynicism, I think, as well. I keep seeing, in the media, both the crypto media, it has to be said, and the kind of, the mainstream media, the normal media, I keep seeing a lot of sort of very kind of derogatory sort of references to the metaverse, or sort of sarcastic, cynical kind of references to
I mean, to me, it's sort of like, it's showing my age a bit here. But I think one of the problems is which one is going to be the one that is adopted. It's kind of like the Betamax, VHS, laser discs, mini discs, CD sort of wars that we've kind of grown up and gone through with technologies that change. And, with Betamax and VHS, it was kind of a race to who was going to be the universally adopted one. I suppose similar to, social media platforms as well.
Yeah.
What was we had High Five, Bebo,
Bebo.
Friends Reunited, and then eventually we had MySpace, and then that kind of came and went and came back again. Facebook sort of is the behemoth that it is today, buying up sort of Instagram and WhatsApp, and then we've got Snapchat and
there's so many, and it's a really interesting process to kind of go back through it. It's a bit like the search engines thing, or the early popular websites. You can really show your age if you go, oh well, I'll just check it on Alta Vista. I'll ask Jeeves. It's like, it's
let me just Bing that.
It's there's a lot at stake, I guess, with the metaverse, and this is something that the big tech companies and everyone else, I think, is gradually waking up to. But tech companies are kind of ahead of the curve on this one.
So is Web 1.0 just Google? Web 2.0 is Facebook and stuff like that. And Web 3.0 is metaverses, or?
Yes, yeah. I mean, you can think of it, that's in very broad terms like that. But yeah, I guess, and the Web 3 thing is a kind of rabbit hole that goes very, very deep. But I guess it's good to sort of start with those terms. So Web 1, you can generally think of as kind of read-only. So you can go and look at a website and read a news article or read someone's blog or whatever. Web 2 comes along and it's kind of read-write. So, the big thing with Web 2 is that we, the consumers, we're generating a lot of the content, and that's what, that's the kind of bandwagon that things like Facebook and Twitter and all these other platforms managed to jump on. Web 3 is, in very broad terms, kind of read, write, own. So the thought is that we create the content, and therefore we should own it, because at the moment we create the content and then the tech giants just
sell advertising and data.
Yeah, basically anything we put up, we don't really own. It's very difficult to monetize a lot of it. The tech giants have got all this power. Web3 is kind of aiming to distribute that, to decentralize, I guess, in its purest form.
But then again, it's kind of just going back to the Kodak reference. Companies like Facebook or as they've been rebranded, Meta, are trying to avoid being left behind and are investing heavily in it, changing the name of it, although changing the name of it may have also been something to do with the data stuff that they were getting sued by. Little rebrand. But so, yeah, I mean, I'm assuming from my sort of layman's knowledge that that's why they're heavily investing in trying to sort of monopolize or become the first to market.
Yeah, they are seeing the way that the internet is going, and obviously they have access to a lot of information that the average person
probably
doesn't.
Aren't allowed to get.
I mean, this is all stuff that we're going to touch on. We're going to talk about Facebook, or Meta as it's now known, quite a lot, because it is a big mover in this regard. So we'll get onto that. Let's before we kick off, I want to just reference a couple of things. So as I say, the metaverse, the idea of the metaverse itself, it's been talked about a lot recently. It's now interest seems to have kind of waned a little bit amongst the the general populace, if you like, and certainly in crypto, it's enthusiasm for the metaverse, which really peaked last year, and we'll look at that in a few minutes. That's kind of waned a little bit as well, and I think really everyone's minds are kind of elsewhere.
Yeah.
But
how can I eat?
How can I pay for things and survive from day to day? There's just so much else going on in the world. But in the background, the metaverse is gaining traction. And one thing that you might notice in the coming weeks, I mean, the Time magazine, the latest issue of Time magazine, has a metaverse-themed cover. And the story is the article is Into the Metaverse, the next digital era will change everything. And it's by a chap called Matthew Ball, who's written an actual book on it called The Metaverse and How It Will Revolutionize Everything. The article itself and the book are both really, really interesting. I'm going to cite them a few times during the article. I'm also going to cite an article by a chap called Arthur Hayes, who is one of the best kind of writers on crypto out there. I may have spoken a little bit about him before. He wrote an article which is on his Medium page. I'll leave links to all these in the show notes, obviously. He wrote an article called Rock, Paper, Scissors Says Go. And it talks about the metaverse. It talks about NFTs and art and all this sort of stuff. And for me, when I first read it, I think it was published last year, if I remember rightly. When I first read it, it was a real light bulb moment for me, because he explains it so well. He's a brilliant writer, very, very funny. I'm going to quote him a couple of times. And that article, I really highly recommend that everyone goes and reads that afterwards, because I think for a lot of people, the penny may drop with a lot of what we're going to talk about today, if it hasn't already by the time we've talked about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you want to know more about the metaverse, read this book.
Yeah.
Don't listen to this podcast. Just go out and read this book or article.
Okay, so I'm going to reference those and maybe quote from those a few times. So let's start off with a kind of definition. Where did this term metaverse come from? What is it? All this sort of stuff. So the term metaverse actually comes from a novel called Snow Crash by a science fiction writer called Neal Stephenson. And the interesting thing about this is it was published in 1992. The concept of a metaverse is perhaps older than a lot of people might think. And this book, Snow Crash, is great. I thoroughly recommend reading it. It's kind of set in a futuristic corporate dystopia. Corporations and businesses have kind of replaced governments. And it's
dystopia, you say?
Dystopia, yeah. And the metaverse of the novel, it takes the form of this street that runs for thousands of miles around the circumference of this planet, and you can access it through virtual reality goggles. And when you're in it, you see it through a sort of first-person perspective, and the users of it appear as avatars, basically, in this very corporate-controlled, otherworldly environment. People have kind of been exploring this theme for a while, this idea of this kind of digital world that exists alongside our own. And actually, I wonder whether even something like The Matrix is kind of exploring that in a sense. You know, this other realm that exists, that you kind of go to. And I mean, you think of the people in the Matrix, when they're plugged into the Matrix, aren't they? They're sort of sitting there in those chairs with that headphone jack in the back of their head. And I was thinking about that on the way over here today, and I was like, could that be seen as a metaphor for people being online, you know, just kind of slumped in a chair, plugged into something else?
Using them for their battery energy, I suppose.
Yeah. So what's interesting, I think, is that these kind of metaverse ideas, they often are very kind of dystopian. You know, they appear as part of a future that, you know, no sane person would really want to be a part of. And I think this ties into a lot of public perception about the metaverse and what the metaverse could be. And I mean, I think that's a fair point to make. A lot of what we're going to discuss today is, you know, how can the metaverse be a good thing, or is it this thing that a lot of people imagine it to be? You know, something that we really no right thinking person would want.
I mean, and the answer is no. I mean, look, it's a weird one, but I don't know if we need to be spending more time online. I don't think we should be getting out more, but it's just not going to happen. So you may as well just embrace it and become a drone.
Yeah. And we'll be back next week. On that note, we're going to talk about that towards the end because, I think that's a fair point, and there's kind of lots of moral and philosophical questions bound up with the idea of the metaverse. So, as I said earlier, the metaverse is this kind of digital world. It exists alongside our own, as some people have described it as the internet in 3D. And Mark Zuckerberg, we all know who he is, he has described it as the successor to the internet, the next iteration of the internet. Basically, a kind of fusion of our physical and our online lives. And I think that, you know, the thought is that it will be accessed using VR, you know, these VR headsets. Obviously, Facebook, Meta, whatever it's called now, is kind of working on this technology.
Yeah, I've got one of them.
Yeah, you've got
Oculus.
Yeah, and I think there could be elements of both virtual reality and augmented reality as well. This idea that, you know, you're not necessarily in a virtual setting, in a completely virtual setting, but these virtual objects can appear. That's what I understand by kind of augmented reality. And a big thing is this idea of an avatar, users navigating through the metaverse, appearing in the metaverse, being represented by this avatar, a virtual, you know, representation of them themselves. And obviously that is what form that takes is kind of infinitely customizable, which I think is, again, something that people are quite sort of excited about for various reasons. And interestingly, the word avatar is ultimately derived from the Sanskrit word avatara, which it kind of stands for the descent of a deity into a terrestrial form. Okay. And if that sounds very clever, that's because it's from Wikipedia. So this metaverse, this digital world that's kind of existing, this internet in 3D, is now starting to take shape in our world, and it's kind of opening up as a new frontier for sort of leisure, business, gaming, you know, just kind of general existence, really. And the scope of it is truly huge. And
socializing.
Yeah, I mean, once you kind of get into thinking about what you could do, what you could achieve in this world, it gets a pretty, you know, dizzying prospect. And this is why many in tech and indeed beyond see it as the next big thing. Now, I'll give you some figures here just to give you an idea of how much, you know, of the potential that people see in the metaverse. I saw one prediction, the metaverse could be worth around $800 billion by 2024, which is the year after next. That's pretty crazy. Then there was a recent report by Citi and KPMG predicted the metaverse economy could be worth $13 trillion by 2030. Which is, you know, I mean, that's serious money. And And you've got analysts, you've got brands, artists, Wall Street banks, kind of exploring this idea of kind of virtual real estate. This new frontier opening up, and metaverse land, this digital land that we'll talk about in more detail later on. This is perceived as kind of internet space. And, this is all tied in with the fact that we humans are spending an increasing amount of time online. And, whether we like it or not. And you just need to look at kids to see how much they're getting sucked in. Because you may not see this with your little one because he's still a baby, isn't he? But I noticed this with friends of mine, children, with my nieces and stuff like that. You give them an iPad or a smartphone to please God keep them quiet for 5 minutes, and they just disappear inside.
It's really bad, but the kid, my child, always goes for my phone and the remote control.
Wow.
Which is kind of indicative about what he sees me doing and then wants to do.
He's copying.
Yeah.
That's what children do, isn't it?
Yeah.
They imitate the adults around them.
It's bad. And like sometimes when he's a little bit restless, there's this one YouTube video that he just loves, and it's just some dancing vegetables. It's this baby sensory thing.
Yeah.
But it's
scary.
It's scary, yeah.
And you see them.
I'm not going to change.
No, it's too late. It's too late for that. He's 6 months.
I've got a friend who doesn't. He's not on his phone around his kids, and he's just a lot more disciplined, I suppose.
Yeah, it's so difficult to avoid because it's all around us, and as you say, children imitate what they see adults doing. That's how they learn. And for me, the scary thing is when you watch a kid playing with an iPad and stuff. It just comes. They've already got this whole swiping thing, and it just looks so
natural to them.
Yeah,
so
and
intuitive.
Their attention spans are just terrible.
Yeah.
One of my nieces you'll see her. She'll watch a video for 3 seconds and skip on to the next one. 3 second next one. It's just watch the stupid video.
Yeah, I'm telling you about cryptocurrency.
Yeah, but come on.
Don't you want to know about Solano?
Look, I told you it's really important you understand the difference between proof of work and proof of stake. This is
I understand.
There's a lot at stake here, pun intended. Anyway, yes. So back to the metaverse. So the metaverse, it's not yet an actual thing, but
isn't it?
Well, I would say there are various kind of iterations of it. It's starting to develop. We're starting to see metaverse worlds created. But I think this idea of a metaverse that we can sort of jump in and out of very, very easily all the time, that is kind of all around us, that really is kind of another dimension that we exist in. We're a way off that yet. There are these metaverse worlds that you can go into, and we're going to talk about a few of them later on. Especially there are a couple of notable ones in the crypto space, but of course we've also got these corporate metaverse worlds that are being worked on. Now, I say corporate, just some examples of brands that have gotten involved in the metaverse in these metaverse worlds to some extent. Adidas, Louis Vuitton, Nike, McDonald's, Samsung, Netflix. You've got football clubs exploring metaverse opportunities, fashion brands, banks, all these sorts of things, are all looking into what the metaverse can do for them, how they can profit from the metaverse in some way. And you've got things like, Nike has a virtual store in the Roblox metaverse. Have you heard of Roblox?
Yeah.
It's this game that kids are into. And the Roblox metaverse is kind of here. It's got about 10 million users. And they're interacting with this platform. They are building stuff in it. There's this community around them. They're socializing. They're spending time in it.
My niece was showing me her restaurant and the menus that she has.
Really?
Terrible menu.
Really?
Really big. She's not going to be able to keep up the standard on that many items.
No.
Has she not watched the Gordon Ramsay Kitchen Nightmare?
Too many vegan choices?
No, it's everything. But
are just a mess.
Yeah.
They've got no idea.
No.
They've got no idea. Now, and money is being spent on the metaverse already. Around from January to May this year, this is something I saw in this Time magazine article. Around $120 billion of investment was pumped into metaverse projects. So there is serious money going into it. And I think I think a really good way to think about it, and something that I think the metaverse could be good for in a way, it could be a good thing, is to think about it, think of this idea of economic growth. Like, this is what capitalism is kind of built on, this idea of constant growth. And this is something that's top of mind for a lot of people at the moment because everyone's talking about a recession, which is obviously negative growth. The economy's shrinking, getting smaller, and obviously that has big consequences. So our economic model in most of the world is built on constant growth. Now,
there's a limit.
Yeah, the planet is only so big. What that growth translates into, what economic growth translates into, is more stuff. It's more plastic in the oceans. It's more CO2 in the atmosphere. It's more crap. It's more consumption, and that is unsustainable. And we've seen. We're living now with the effects of what decades of that have had on the planet. And I don't think you can just dismiss that as an environmentalist argument. It's if we keep growing, then we will eventually reach,
like a breaking point.
Yeah. Now, the metaverse saturation point. Yeah. Now, the metaverse you can, I think, look at as and one of the reasons why I think it could be a force for good in the future is that this could provide this next dimension for us to grow in, economically to grow in.
Yeah.
But without, you would hope, consuming all the world's resources, without manufacturing more plastic that ends up stuffed down a sea lion's throat or whatever. So I think in that way it is a really fascinating concept. We can grow into this other world, and we can keep evolving. We can and more people are able to have stuff, but without hopefully the sort of physical impact on the environment around us. So, and I mean, this idea of an online economy is already, it's massive. People spend billions, trillions of dollars a year online, and the online economy is growing everywhere, really. So that's a way to think about the metaverse as a possible.
I see that as a potential benefit, because we're probably not going to stop the sort of constant consumption, the constant need for growth. Although there is arguments of saying that, it's kind of like, do we need to just be creating more and doing more, and that's kind of negative.
Recycling and using more. Yeah, this idea of the circular economy, this idea of sustainability, all this sort of stuff. And I mean, it's one of the crazy aspects of humanity, isn't it? We know that we got to do it.
We're in a system that we're just kind of forced to carry on with.
Yeah. Yeah, we're locked into this. We're locked into this idea of constant growth, and there are people pushing back against this.
Yeah,
but it's very, very difficult. I mean, how is a politician going to get elected on a platform of like, I'm going to shrink the economy? I'm going to,
or let's just scrap everything.
Yeah, I tell you what, if I'm president, you won't have so much stuff, and see how many people vote for them then. Vote for them then. It's just. Yeah, but it's very difficult to see a way that we can have it both ways. That we can keep growing, but also,
Yeah, that's an interesting.
Sustain.
Point.
Also not exhaust the planet. And the metaverse, I think, gives a possible answer to that question. Now, yeah, you asked earlier. I mean, does the metaverse exist? Is there, is it already up and running? And it's kind of starting to form. And
but there are. But yes, because there's the Roblox, which is a form of a metaverse.
Yeah.
There is. I remember on the Oculus, there was. It's just kind of like you just walk around, you talk to people, you can play little games, you can build a little house, you can do all of that sort of stuff. And that was a version of the metaverse. I was talking to people. This was during the lockdown in Texas,
Yeah.
You know, these housewives in Texas, you know, all these people from all around the world. You're just going around there. There was virtual comedy clubs. There was all sorts of stuff going on.
This virtual space.
Yeah.
And this was in Roblox, was it?
No, this was, I can't remember what it was called, but it was one of the Oculus ones, you know.
Okay. Yeah. It's starting to form, and there are these metaverse worlds. They're kind of all separate from each other, more or less. But the idea is people are getting comfortable with the idea, or people are getting more familiar with the idea. I think you could say, you know, this isn't something new. This idea of walking around as an avatar.
The first metaverse job. Their job is to wake up, go and do stuff in the metaverse.
I mean, there is lots of stuff happening in the metaverse. We're going to talk about that in a minute or so. I'm not. Yeah, I mean, there must be people. Yeah, who at least part of their job is metaverse based. That is going to. I mean, again, this is an opportunity for growth, because this is not just an opportunity for people to buy and sell, but also for employment as well. So, yeah, we'll come to that. But as I was going to say, I think this idea of walking around as an avatar in a digital world that isn't the real world has kind of existed. You know, we're sort of familiar with that. I mean, if you ever played Grand Theft Auto, there's kind of elements of metaverse in that, isn't it? It's like your
Farmville. You know what I mean? You've got your own farm, you're building it, you're doing stuff, there's other people involved. It's kind of...
Yeah. It's a concept that's it's starting to grow, but obviously, you know, and you've also got online virtual worlds like Second Life, which is still like, I mean, I remember everyone getting very excited about that a few years ago, and then it seemed to have sort of fizzled out.
Sims.
Yeah, The Sims. Second Life is still going. It's got hundreds of millions. It's growing. Like it's still a thing. A lot of people still use it. It just doesn't seem to be attracting the headlines anymore. But and then you've got virtual world games. You've got the likes of Fortnite and Minecraft, which are obviously massive. You know, you use avatars in those, and crucially, for the purposes of what we're going to talk about later, you also have these in-game currencies. You know, which you can spend and buy stuff in this particular world. They're not cryptocurrencies though, and that's an important thing to understand. But and yeah, you know, and talking of crypto, cryptocurrency has opened up the kind of latest frontier in what the metaverse is looking to evolve into. This idea of metaverse platforms like Decentraland and the Sandbox. These are two ones I'm going to mention time and time again. They're the biggest kind of crypto blockchain focused ones. And you've also got kind of blockchain games as well, which, you know, like Axie Infinity, Illuvium, Star Atlas, things like that, big time studios, you know, all these ideas that you know, are slowly starting to evolve and make use of blockchain technology and also cryptocurrency as well. And you have things like, I mean, the Sandbox, for instance, it started life as a mobile game, and it then pivoted to blockchain in 2018. It was bought by a company called Animoca Brands, which is a big kind of developer in this space, and it's now sort of switched to becoming this metaverse platform. And I guess the big innovation here is the use of cryptocurrencies and NFTs in particular for in-game assets. And we're going to talk later on about how this makes these kind of metaverse worlds different from the sort of corporate ones that, you know, the likes of Meta and stuff are imagining. So sort of park that for the moment. But the idea is, you know, you're able to own these digital assets with value, but beyond the confines of the platform. You know, you have control over them. Because the game platforms, you know, the Minecrafts, the Fortnites of this world, and we've talked about this before, they function as kind of walled gardens. Yeah,
no, I was thinking about this, and I've seen some issues with this with the Oculus stuff. Now, people were... I was playing a game, I can't remember what it was called, kind of basically a Fortnite version on Oculus. And there was a bit of a forum there, and we were on, there was a Facebook forum with it, was sort of people talking about it, and someone lost their Facebook account.
Right.
Or something went wrong with it. Either they got hacked or it got deleted, or they'd done something wrong on Facebook, and they lost all the game. They couldn't access the game. They basically bricked the unit, and they'd spent a lot of money on a game, and they were pissed off about that. But I suppose that's the thing where it's a walled garden. It's like all there. Whereas this is, if it's with the crypto, if it's an NFT and it's on a blockchain, then it's decentralized. So it's not at the whim of Mark Zuckerberg or
exactly. Yeah. And this is a big thing. You know, this idea of a centralized metaverse that is owned and controlled and built and regulated, all this sort of stuff by a particular company. You know, this is I think the big challenge that we face with the metaverse coming in the future, because you know, well, we'll get to it in a minute. I wanted to, you know, in these decentralized metaverses, in the likes of Decentraland and the Sandbox, you know, you have this virtual land which you can buy up as, you know, NFTs. It comes as NFTs. You can then develop it and use it. You can monetize it, and this is a big innovation as far as metaverses go. You know, because you can do anything. You can exhibit digital art. You can host virtual events. I mean, Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
He's hosted. He's done gigs in the metaverse before. And yeah, I mean, this space, this metaverse land can be used advertising, branding, sort of just general exposure and stuff. And yeah, I don't think it's a big imaginative leap to understand why so many companies are getting excited about it. And I mean, we've seen real world stuff kind of happening in these metaverses. So the first metaverse mortgage was reported earlier this year. The first metaverse wedding was reported in February this year. In fact, I've got a quote from a Cointelegraph article here about it. This was 7th of February 2022. A Phoenix couple tied the knot with their digital identities this weekend in the first marriage to take place in the metaverse. The wedding ceremony took place in Decentraland, complete with witnesses, Supreme Court Justice officiant Clint Bolick, and a virtual crowd of 2,000 guests on Saturday.
It's got to be expensive, 2,000 wedding guests.
Yeah. Well, not in the metaverse.
Yeah.
Apparently, though, it didn't quite go to plan. Like,
they divorced already? Did they not consummate it virtually?
let me find the article because it's actually quite funny. Here we are. Although the couple, this is another quote, they were met with some rather archaic technical issues. Decentraland struggled to handle the number of guests in attendance. Ryan's avatar was left at the aisle as Candice's failed to make a digital appearance, but only for some guests.
Okay.
Depending on which server attendees had been split into, the bride was wearing a dress, a hoodie, or wasn't there at all.
That's amazing.
So it was a little bit rough and ready by the sound of it. What to me is one of the most interesting things I found in researching the metaverse is that the idea, as we said, has been around for quite some time. And obviously, you know, the word, as we saw, first recorded uses in 1992 in this book, Snow Crash. Now, Matthew Ball, in this Time magazine article, makes a really good point. He says, transformations, this is a quote, don't experience switch flips. So we're in the mobile era today, but the first cellular network call was in 1973. The first wireless data network was in 1991, smartphone in 1992. So it's this idea of, you know, the concept is nothing new and the technology is being tested. We're just not at that stage.
Universal adoption yet.
Where everyone is ready to pick it up.
I suppose it comes when, is it just a breakthrough in technology, sort of making it more affordable for mass adoption, you know, like an Oculus, or just the convenience of it, like an Oculus headset. You wear it for a few hours before it gets a ball ache.
Yeah.
Sweaty, hot. But the technology's going to get better. It's going to get smaller. You're going to be able to just have it on a pair of sunglasses. I don't know. But
it was interesting, wasn't it? Because there was the experiment with Google Glass, wasn't there, a few years ago, and it seemed to sort of fall very flat. But this idea that, you know, you could be online at the same time as going about your daily life. And
Facebook and Ray-Ban have combined to make some glasses that have cameras in them that's connected to your Facebook account and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And they just look like normal glasses.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I was looking at this because I was like, okay, this could be quite cool to record some stand-up from my point of view.
Yeah.
And, you could splice that in. But it's only I think because it's kind of launched after the Facebook Cambridge Analytica thing. And I think they were just like, okay, cool, maybe we don't record everyone everywhere unaware. And I think it's 30 seconds is the max you're allowed to record and stuff.
It's tempting to imagine people at Ray-Ban reading those articles and going, I think we need to rethink this partnership a little bit.
Yeah.
So I want to ask the question, why is the metaverse a thing now? Because I think that might be something that listeners are wondering themselves. It's like, why am I suddenly hearing metaverse all the time? Not just because they're listening to this episode, but why do they keep seeing mentions of the metaverse?
Is it the money that's going in?
Well, yeah, I think it is a big part. I mean, the hype around the metaverse kind of really kicked into gear last year in October, in October 2021, when Facebook announced that it was rebranding to Meta.
Yeah.
And I mean, this just sent the whole thing into overdrive. And do you remember there was that just ghastly presentation with Mark Zuckerberg where he was showing off his avatar, and his avatar actually looked more lifelike than he does. And just sort of okay, so we've got Meta and other tech companies like Microsoft. They're waking up to the value proposition of the metaverse that we were talking about earlier. And I mean, Microsoft acquired Activision Blizzard, the game developer, for $75 billion recently. And that apparently was very much with an eye to metaverse development. And that ties into what I was saying about all this money being pumped into metaverse projects. Meta is pouring money into the metaverse as well as other tech companies. And I guess, basically they see it as a way for them to expand the boundaries of their current business models. To get ahead of the pack and be there for the next iteration of the internet, for this 3D internet, because they want us to spend more time online using whatever services they offer, and which will make them incalculable amounts of money. I mean, it's already made them stupid money, but I think they
want to maintain and grow.
Yeah. And again, I think it's really important at this point to draw the line between the corporate metaverse concept and then these blockchain-based decentralized equivalents. Because, let's face it, Meta's metaverse, for instance, will be under Meta's control. It will ultimately just be another way for Meta, Facebook, whatever you want to call it, to do what it already does, which is harvest your data and sell it to advertisers. Like that is what Facebook's metaverse will be about. It won't be about this awful jargon that Zuckerberg uses, connecting people, sharing, bringing people together. It'll ostensibly be about that. What it will really be is about more ways to capture data and flog you stuff you don't need. And it's doubtful whether any of these corporate metaverses would want to offer much interaction with the other ones, because they want to keep that value for themselves. They want to lock it in. Again, this idea of a walled garden. I can't imagine that Meta would be all that comfortable with the idea of someone interacting. Maybe having a business in its metaverse and then taking some of that capital and
like I said before,
into Microsoft.
Betamax won't work. A Betamax videotape won't work on a VHS.
yeah. It's like you can't. There isn't a universal charger for iPhones and Android phones. It's like it has to be different because God forbid there should be any sort of
universality.
Reusing. Yeah. So, and I mean, again, you can see the attraction for a company like Meta to do this. It's got the user base, it's developing the tech, and its business model is dependent on user attention. The metaverse, the idea of a metaverse, is a great way to capture value. And I think the big danger here is network effects. A platform like Meta has the money and resources to construct a metaverse which looks really cool, which can, you can do loads of stuff, a bit like the original Facebook platform was, and everyone just goes to that. And then network effects means that, everyone just kind of stays there. It's like, well, this is what we know, this is what we're happy with. And they've captured it. And I mean, again, you can see the value proposition, can't you? If you're building a place that becomes a place of commerce, if you own the land, say, on which that commerce is happening, you can be rent seeking in that way. And in the metaverse, you can see how that would work. If people are doing business there, it's like, well, I own the land, I own the metaverse, so I'll just take a percentage cut of every transaction. And I mean, you can see how that instantly translates. I mean, that's just a license to print money, isn't it? So there's this huge potential value proposition for those who are able to develop it. And I should say, on a more kind of scary note, I mean, this idea of corporate metaverses doesn't, to me, sound all that nice. What's more scary? Yeah, and China, states like China are also looking at developing metaverse technologies. And I mean, you can see the attraction for that, if everyone's existing in a metaverse that's been built and is run by the Chinese Communist Party, and it can see everything you're doing and everything you're spending. I mean, that's basically what they want, isn't it? That's their ideal society. So, the governments are waking up to it too. Here's Arthur Hayes from this brilliant article that I was talking about. Quote, China is fashioning a mobile-first online society. All data and interactions are networked, monitored, and policed by the state. The Chinese metaverse is complete with social credit scores that encompass the entirety of your on- and offline lives. Given the amount of R&D spending on AI and 5G, Beijing believes the future is a digital-first connected population. Scary. Yeah. So, having looked at that, having looked at this kind of nightmarish scenario of corporate and government metaverses, let's look at the metaverse and crypto. Because when Facebook made this announcement, when it changed
They launched a coin. Did they launch a coin?
Facebook has tried to launch a cryptocurrency before. It tried to launch something called Libra back in 2019. And it then rebranded it to Diem and last year or the year before. And that project's now died, fortunately. When Facebook launched Libra or announced Libra in 2019, regulators in the US, it was a big moment because they went, hang on a sec.
Yeah, it's something this big.
Yeah, it's like the idea of Bitcoin is uncomfortable enough for us, but a cryptocurrency issued by this massive company, overseen by and it was a big moment, and basically Facebook really sort of spoiled it for everyone else in a way.
Okay.
But yeah, anyhow, when Facebook made this announcement, it was changing its name to Meta. Metaverse-related cryptos pumped big time. So, for instance, Decentraland's Mana token, the Mana token for Decentraland, which we talked about in the tokens episode last week, its price on the 27th of October 2021 was 81 cents. The announcement from Meta was the next day. A couple of days later, it was $3.53. If you look on its price chart, it's crazy. So the metaverse concept had landed, and many began to believe that crypto-focused projects could actually make it happen. There was excitement beyond just what Facebook was trying to do. And there's certainly a lot more hope that crypto-focused metaverse could offer, alternative to corporate ones. And now the crucial difference, I guess, when you think of a crypto metaverse, and again, the touchstones here are Decentraland and the Sandbox. What they do is that they have these in-game assets. So Decentraland has land, which is the NFTs that represent this virtual land, and Mana, which is the in-game currency. Now, anyone can buy these, and crucially, they can take custody of them. They can move them into their own wallet. So with Decentraland, for instance, it's built on Ethereum, so you'd use your MetaMask browser extension wallet. But you have custody of those assets. Now, Facebook has talked about embracing NFTs, issuing NFTs in its metaverse, but it almost certainly won't let users take custody of those. You won't be able to move those NFTs into your own wallet, into your own self-custodied wallet, because again, that would allow you to take value out of that metaverse, out of that walled garden that Facebook is trying to create, and the corporations don't want that. So the big difference here, when we talk about this idea of a decentralized, of a blockchain-based metaverse, is that the decentralization comes from the fact that users take ownership of their assets, take custody of their assets. And I mean, Decentraland, for instance, it operates as a DAO, as a decentralized autonomous organization, which makes governance and decision making decentralized at its core. If you hold Mana, if you hold land, you get a say in how Decentraland is run, how the DAO is run. And there are lots of other, sort of metaverse, decentralized kind of metaverse platforms that are springing up. But again, the Sandbox and Decentraland are the two big ones. And yeah, they've allowed, anyone can buy in to these things, and there's this idea of decentralization. And I mean, decentralization there are varying degrees of it. And I mean, for instance, the Sandbox, because it's controlled by Animoca Brands, there's questions around how decentralized the Sandbox really is. And this process of decentralization is an ongoing thing. It's not just, you can't just say, oh, well, it's decentralized because anyone can buy in. It's like, how much can people buy up lots of land and therefore have more control? How much control does the company that built this thing in the first place, how much does it retain? So decentralization is a very all-encompassing term. But certainly these kind of, these blockchain-focused metaverses, these decentralized metaverses, to my mind, offer a much more, a much better idea of what the metaverse could be in the future. Yeah. And yeah, as I said, corporate metaverses, it's hard to imagine them allowing custodial ownership of the assets.
Or in the same way as traditionally.
You have this kind of crucial moment, I think. It's like, okay, I own this. This is mine. I've paid for it. So can I now do what I want with it?
But I think you can do what you want with it, but within the realms of the ecosystem.
Yeah. It's like, so
I'm in the same.
Yeah, I'm in Megacorp's metaverse, and I own
Kim.com's.
these NFTs. I am in Kim.com's metaverse. Can I take the NFTs that I've created, say, in here, and take them over to Decentraland, or can I take them to Microsoft Metaverse or whatever? And it's like, it's hard to imagine that happening, because that means that value's been taken out. So. And this, I think, leads us on. I mean, let's talk more about the drawbacks of the metaverse concept itself. Like leaving aside whether it's a corporate metaverse, whether it's a crypto-focused, a decentralized metaverse, there are still drawbacks to the concept itself.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the first one is, let's face it, a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people aren't exactly their best selves when they're online. There are already instances. I mean, we were talking about Vice magazine earlier. Here's a Vice headline from February this year: "Woman says she was virtually gang raped in Facebook's metaverse."
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, and it's pretty horrible to read. She says she went in there. Is
that a salacious clickbait title, or is that, because I don't know the metaverse.
I mean, having read the article, it was
because
it makes you
can you not
queasy.
Just take the headset off?
Well, yeah, but I think I think that's a question that a lot of people ask. It's like, well, if you felt uncomfortable in there, why didn't you get out of there? It's like, well, that's.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not condoning the.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the issue. The issue is.
How do you have sex with someone on?
Well, I mean, the keyword.
How do we?
Please let me
consensually.
I mean, this is why virtually gang raped. So reading this article, this woman was sort of walking around this Facebook metaverse as her female avatar, and she said she was sort of surrounded by all these male avatars with male voices, who are sort of touching her avatar and making inappropriate comments and stuff. It's pretty queasy to read. It's just like, wow, okay, we've got this new thing, and already people are behaving like this. But I mean, I sound surprised, but I mean, this is just how a lot of people are, isn't it? But I mean, yeah. So whatever form the metaverse takes, if it's constructed along the same lines as much of the rest of the internet, then I think you could argue it'll just turn into another place for people that's kind of lawless, and where people just go around being dicks to each other. So there's a lot that needs
sign me up.
How do I get in there? There's always going to be abuse of new technologies and people just being absolute knob cheeses. Yeah, and I mean this is already a question, isn't it? But new laws governing how people behave online. I mean, I think they are going to need to be introduced. I mean, I'm not saying social credit scores are the answer here.
I mean, you look at it with Elon but I suppose, look, if it's kind of linked to you, like Twitter, like under Elon, potentially, if it goes ahead or he's forced to buy it or whatever, you're going to be, okay, cool, you pay to be verified, and that's how you can interact and do a lot more.
Accountability.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is actually, I mean, this is slightly tangential, but one of the big things being talked about in the crypto space at the moment is this idea of a decentralized digital ID. So, you can sort of prove who you are. You can prove that you're a real person, you're not a bot or whatever. But you still have that degree of anonymity. Privacy. Yeah, you can be anonymous, but you're still, you still have an ID. And it's a really interesting idea, of how you bring this kind of accountability to the digital space, to stop people, I guess, just
because in real life you can just get punched in the face, but
yeah, not
if you're
so
acting
much
like a dick, you get punched in the face or arrested, or or a comeuppance will be coming potentially.
Yeah.
Whereas online, you can just unplug and forget about it.
Yeah. And this is what a lot of people do. This is how a lot of people live their lives. They're perfectly sort of normal human beings in real life, but a darker side of them emerges when they're on the internet. And if the metaverse, when the metaverse becomes a thing.
Also, I also think one of the things that is a problem is nuance, and human interactions is completely removed from a tweet.
Yeah.
Do you know? It's like when I send you a text, it could be read in 3 or 4 different tones and voices.
Yeah.
Same thing with the tweet. And how people interact online. Some people take great offense to something when it could just be, misworded, or it could be interpreted in 2 completely different ways. Sarcasm, is lost, and people think you think exact opposite when you're actually on the same side of the coin. So maybe with the metaverse and it's a bit more of a there's more detail.
Yeah.
Then maybe you can tell if someone's being sarcastic because it's kind of more of a face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, well, this absolutely, and this kind of leads into what I mean.
Obviously, the thing that happened to that girl, obviously, that's not like
that's not. Yeah, I mean that is taking that kind of that extra angle of realism.
Yeah,
and going.
But I suppose that is the GTA. Kind of, it's not real. So in GTA, wasn't there this thing where you had to you sleep with a prostitute and then you could shoot her and get your money back, and that was a thing. And it's kind of
and there was a huge outcry about it, wasn't it? Because
when it's a what is the term? A non, like it's not a real
non-playing character.
NPC. Oh, so I did get it right. I said NCP.
Yeah,
like the car park.
National car parks. Yeah.
I bet there were people shouting at me. When it's a NPC, it doesn't matter, but when it's someone when it could be a child.
Yeah. It's there's so many different there's so much to think about with how people interact in this space. But I mean, what you're saying leads quite nicely on to the final bit that I wanted to talk about. What are the actual benefits of the metaverse, and how can it be a good thing? So what are the potential benefits of the metaverse? We've talked about.
I mean, money. If you've invested loads, you can get lots of money.
Yeah, if you're a tech company.
if you're Mark Zuckerberg,
there's almost unlimited amounts of money to be made. Yeah,
and as you touched on earlier, the potential for growth without the limitations of reality.
Yeah. And I think also the way that it could offer a way to actually bring people together, to use a sort of Zuckerbergism, if you like, but, to bring people together in a way that things like Zoom or Microsoft Teams, they can't.
Yeah.
And it's been really interesting the past couple of years with the pandemic and stuff, hasn't it? Because, suddenly there was this, video call, virtual meetings and all this sort of stuff became the thing. Mm-hmm. And we were given this kind of glimpse into what we thought was the future. And I mean, I can't really think of many people who actually enjoy Zoom. It's actually enjoy having these meetings over Zoom.
You know what? I disagree.
Really?
I disagree because I have a newborn child, and I love spending time with him.
Yeah.
And whereas sometimes if you come into the office, when I come in here to the comedy club or whatever, I am just busy without the whole day. Whereas if I've got a Zoom meeting, I know, okay, cool, it's going to be here till roughly here. I prep for that meeting. We are not distracted and we don't all have to be in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do it with my kid just in the cot over there.
Yeah.
So there are definitely benefits to it.
But I'd argue that you enjoy that what you like about that is the convenience. It makes your life easier. The actual process, talking to someone on a computer screen is, for me, and I think for most people, is no substitute for face to face, for speaking.
You don't
face-to-face.
know who I work with, and I don't want to be face to face with any of these cretins at any point. I would like miles between us, and and sometimes I like to turn the camera off. No, face to face is always better, and you get more of a feel. But there's the convenience, I'd say, is a massive benefit. And it means you can be more productive. I can have more meetings in a day because I don't have to travel. And
exactly. And this, I think, is where the metaverse can really offer something, because it can be this way that we can actually interact with people in a much more personalized way, with the convenience of something like Zoom, but with a lot more reality, if you like. It's not talking to a two-dimensional face on a computer screen. And I think that once the technology catches up with the concept, then the metaverse of the future, I think you'll be meeting someone virtually, and you'll be able to be on other sides of the world, and it will be very much like you are in the room with them. It will feel almost seamless. But I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves there. But I think you can see
just one benefit of it there. It's kind of
you have more realistic meetings with people, so you don't have to travel.
Just looking at it from, okay, cool, we would have a group call. Which would always be a nightmare because not everyone is listening and not everyone is, they're doing other things. Whereas now you've got the Zoom thing, which is a video call, so you can actually see people, you can see the reactions on their face. Yeah. If someone you throw out an offer or make a suggestion to people on a voice call, you don't know their actual true reaction because you don't see their facial reaction. Whereas on a Zoom or a Google Meet or video call, you can see their reaction to it, and you can sort of go, okay, cool, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah. But so this idea of being, of having the convenience of virtual, of meeting virtually, but with the, with the kind of human side of actually meeting face to face. I mean, there's limitless potential there. I mean, one example I saw cited was education. Some of the people I felt sorriest for over the course of the pandemic and lockdowns and stuff was these poor kids having to, attend virtual classes, virtual school. Think of education in practical terms. You could have a virtual class of people from any corner of the planet. You could demonstrate stuff. It's so much this kind of 3D aspect of it. One example cited was medical students. Like, let's say you need to practice doing a heart bypass or something like that. You can do it virtually. The teacher can be in the room with you, so to speak. And again, as the technology evolves, you'll be able to practice it on an avatar and stuff like that. So the scope for it is amazing. Of course, again, people being able to get together, it might eliminate the need for a lot of air travel, for instance. Virtual meeting. I mean, I've spoken to loads of people. I know one guy who works in advertising and marketing and stuff, and his job basically is client facing. It's his job to go and schmooze clients. And he said, before the pandemic, I used to travel. I used to take sort of 3 or 4 flights a week sometimes, make 3 or 4 trips a week to, all across Europe and stuff. And then obviously it's stopped during the pandemic. And I said, do you think you'll go fully virtual now? He's like, no, because people value a handshake. And so, but if you're able to do that, if you're able to marry the best of both worlds, then that's a huge benefit.
Reduce it down to, okay, cool, we'll have a couple of meetings on Zoom and then we'll do the nitty-gritty face-to-face.
Yeah. If you're able to go and do stuff in the metaverse, you could eliminate a lot of just unnecessary, boring stuff. Like, for instance, Barbados is trying to establish an embassy in the metaverse. Now, imagine if you needed to go and get a visa or a passport. At the moment, you have to go to the embassy in town. You have to sit on an uncomfortable chair in a stuffy room and wait your turn along with everyone else. Imagine if you could just do that from home. You could have your virtual passport stamped. You could have your meeting sort of face to face with this person for your visa, all this sort of stuff. And I mean, go back to the idea of weddings. I mean, you could have once they get these kind of virtual weddings right, it's like, think of all the bridezillas who want their dream kind of wedding. We all want to get married on the beach in Hawaii, don't we? But imagine that is something people could do virtually. And as the technology improves, that could be hyper realistic. Everyone could get married on the beach in Hawaii. To be serious for a moment, I think one of the really important aspects to consider about the metaverse is that we are living in a world that is getting increasingly automated. Traditional jobs are dying out. I think in a lot of cases they're dying out a lot slower than perhaps was predicted a few years ago. But gradually machines, computers are taking over more and more of what actual humans do. And I think this is a time bomb that we're sitting on for the future. It's like, what are people going to do all day long? And I think this is where the metaverse could really offer something, not only in terms of giving people leisure, giving people somewhere to go and escape to and spend their time and, do things rather than just kind of sitting around drinking or, basically making a nuisance of themselves. But where people can exist in a world where there is just less work for people to do. But also it could open up new frontiers of employment. And we touched on this earlier, didn't we? This idea that the metaverse itself will not only create economic growth, but also create the jobs that growth needs. So, there would be more employment opportunities for people in the metaverse. And you would hope that if that was done right, like a metaverse themed job might be a lot better than some of the sort of hard, crappy jobs that people have to do in real life. So, again, I think this is a really sort of interesting and potentially good, force for good that the metaverse avenue that the metaverse can open up, because it addresses, I think, one of the big problems that we as a species face is, as we get machines to do more and more things for us, as robots become more advanced, as technology becomes more advanced, what are humans going to do with themselves all day long? And I think the metaverse can offer some answers to those questions. Not all the answers, I think.
Education, gambling, sex work.
Exactly. All catered for, all virtual.
EGS.
all from the comfort of your own home. Here's one more quote from Arthur Hayes regarding what I was talking about before you hijacked it with education, sex work and gambling. He says, quote, "The advent of super-intelligent networked thinking machines will herald an era where the vast majority of humans' labour is economically worthless. Freed from the physical constraints of work, humans will turn to their new digital worlds and the complete expression of civilization's creativity and vitality. The metaverse is the future."
That transition is going to be interesting.
Yeah. It's going to be quite gradual, I think, as well. But I mean, we are, in a way, we're already seeing it, aren't we? Because we're already seeing these new jobs emerge. Like, influencer is a job. And a few years ago, people would have gone, well, how on earth could you earn a living from posting photos on a website? How on earth? You can't monetize that. Already, the internet, as we know it, is creating new jobs. Is creating new. I mean, I'm a content creator.
Yeah, I suppose.
People like me, you might say, thankfully, did not exist a few years ago. In a relatively short period of time, these new tools that have become available to us have made new types of jobs for people and basically keeps people like me off the streets. And I think we can all agree that's probably a good thing. So, and this kind of leads me on to the conclusion. And the question I wrote down here was, related to the metaverse was, should we care? Do people need to care about the metaverse? Is it something that they should be thinking of? And
what I think is weird and what I think is going to be interesting is the effect on mental health.
Yeah.
And because we're not evolving as quickly as the technology, and being in a virtual world for 10 hours a day probably isn't great.
No, and it's so hard to imagine what effects this is going to have, because on the one hand you could say, and we've kind of touched on it, haven't we? On the one hand, you could say, like, in the metaverse, you will have this kind of interaction with people, and the technology will evolve so much that it will feel real, but it won't be. And as you say, we're not evolved. We're a species that is still essentially, built to
hunter-gatherer.
Yeah, like we kind of belong in the great outdoors, and there is this huge switch going on, and we're seeing the effects just of the internet as it currently is. Without the metaverse getting started, we're seeing the effects that the internet is having on people. Whether it's children sort of experiencing more bullying because they can't escape it. It's not like you can just go home and switch off. Like when we were kids, if something was getting you down, if someone was bullying you at school,
there was a reprieve.
There was a reprieve, yeah. But now it follows you home. Like, what will that be like in the metaverse? Will there be any escape? I mean, what about these people who want to switch off entirely? There'll be people at the other extreme. Something really interesting in this novel Snow Crash, which we talked about, was that there's this kind of subculture of people. I think they're called gargoyles, and they are the people who choose to exist all the time in the metaverse, and they wear these VR goggles all the time.
But this is the thing. It's kind of like the balance, because you're going to need to eat, you're going to need to exercise, you're going to need to bathe.
Yeah,
Like the real world is still going to be there. It's kind of
tell that to those gamers in places like South Korea. I mean, do you remember that was a thing a few years ago? I mean, this was pre-pandemic and stuff, but there was this issue of kids, mostly young men, I think, but also young women in places like South Korea, who were going into these gaming cafes and just going online for hours, days at a time, and barely eating, and developing all sorts of problems. It's kind of here. This business, this idea of how much time we spend online, of how that shapes our life, how that how that affects us physically and mentally, and all these things. These are already questions that we're having to ask ourselves, and those questions are only going to become more pronounced as the metaverse, as the idea of this internet in 3D kind of, I guess, coalesces around us. Because it won't suddenly be, we'll all wake up and it's like, here's introducing the metaverse, and here you are. It'll gradually encroach upon our lives, where to the extent in, let's say, 20 years' time, you'll sit down and you'll go, wow, oh my word, I have not spent much time in real life. I've not, as Arthur Hayes calls it, the meat space, which I think is a great. Maybe you might have borrowed that term from elsewhere. I am not in the meat space right now. I haven't touched another human being in real life for quite a long time. I think that is genuinely how it will be, and the question is how we can shape that to be. How we can lessen the impact of that. How we can make the metaverse a good thing, or a better thing than it will be if we just kind of allow it to go down the path that it seems to be going at the moment. So if someone's asking themselves that question, should I care about the metaverse? The answer is yes, because it's coming whether we like it or not. And for one thing, because there's too much money to be made for it not. Those wheels are in motion. And what we're really waiting for is the technology to catch up. But as you said, technology is evolving a lot quicker than humans. So the technology is coming, and there's lots that needs to be done. Obviously, VR is quite is much more advanced now than it was just a few years ago. Yeah. But The Time magazine article talks about this. Talks about some of the technologies that will need to be developed in order for the metaverse to kind of reach the potential that it can. For people to be able to to virtually touch each other or something, to experience
gloves. It's kind of you got to wear a bodysuit. I don't know.
Yeah, like how are you gonna synthesize? How are you gonna develop the technology that someone in a virtual world, in the metaverse, can experience all 5 senses? You can see and you can hear. How do you taste, smell, and touch in that world? That technology is still.
There's haptic suits already, but it's kind
of. They're working on it, but they're not there yet. So there's a lot.
Smell-o-vision is going to be interesting.
Smell-o-vision, yeah. It's.
I suppose it's Elon Musk's Neuralink that's going to be the.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's being worked on. These technologies are, they're not all at the drawing board stage. They're no longer science fiction. They are being worked on, and places like Meta, Meta is pumping billions of dollars into the development of these technologies. It's not just this concept of the metaverse itself. It's all the sort of things that we're going to have in order to interact with it. So I guess the question is, can the metaverse solve problems? Can it give us access to this better world, rather than just add an extra dimension to our lives, rather than just add an extra dimension to the problems that we already have? Who wants to live in Mark Zuckerberg's version of the future? Well, not me, for a start. And I guess, if you want to call to arms for the, to wrap the episode up, it's that we, as I think the crypto community, as crypto aficionados, a lot of responsibility is on us to ensure that the metaverse becomes something good. Because I think cryptocurrency can offer, we're already seeing it with decentralized metaverses like Decentraland and to a lesser extent the Sandbox. They are the rival to these corporate metaverses. And I think that is the direction that we need to go. We need to have a metaverse that everyone can own a part of. Because if you're just living in a corporation's world, then that, I think, is when you get the dystopia that so much of that the metaverse kind of exists in culturally. As we said at the beginning of the episode, so many of these ideas of the metaverse crop up in these dystopian setting. How can we? I don't think we can ever make it utopian, and we can never make it a perfect world. But we, the people, need to have a say in how it evolves. So there's your rallying cry for the crypto community. Closing thoughts, Michael?
We're fucked.
I wish we hadn't done the metaverse now. This episode has ruined the metaverse.
No, I like the only thing I worry about with that is the money that can be pumped in, and the corporation metaverses are just going to be, they're going to have the patents on smell-o-vision and all of this sort of stuff, so that it's going to be more realistic and more enjoyable and easier to buy in and easier to become addicted to, rather than the sort of open source version.
Yeah.
Like Linux is great, but I don't use it.
Not many people do.
Yeah.
It's that thing. We as humans are we're so cussed in a way, aren't we? Because we'll keep doing things that we know are bad for us. Like I will spend too much time on crypto Twitter, even though I know crypto Twitter is bad for you. It's great to go on there for 5 minutes, but then I find out I've spent half an hour on there, and I'm like, I'll just look.
I think you're reducing these numbers quite a bit. Yeah, probably a lot longer than half an hour.
There are a lot worse people than me, but I mean, my point is that we do things that we know are bad for us.
No, I agree.
And I think we will come to see the metaverse, however it exists. There will be good and bad, and it's just how much we can shape it ourselves, so as the bad is contained, so as it's not, and crucially, I think, so as it's not just funneling profits into the pockets of mega corporations, which is basically where the way the internet currently works. How can we make it more democratic? How can we make a metaverse for the people? how can we make a metaverse that isn't just a world where we indulge all the very kind of worst aspects of ourselves, how it doesn't become a place where you just go to, for vice, for your idea of, well, I suppose there's education in your metaverse, isn't there? There's also gambling and sex work.
Yeah, it's learning how to gamble.
The education is very much tied into the two.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a kind of free-form rambling chat about the metaverse. I hope that's kind of explained the concept a bit to people.
I hope you're not as terrified as I am.
I hope that, well, I mean, if you are, that should hopefully galvanize you to...
I hope you're not as terrified as I am, but also apathetic and lazy.
I'm terrified.
I'm terrified, but I'm also terrified that I'm not going to do anything about this.
Yeah. Well, folks, you know what to do. Just don't do nothing.
Yeah.
Don't be like Mike.
Don't be like Mike. We reappropriate that. Be more. I want to be like Mike. Don't be like Mike.
Don't be like Mike. Whatever you
do, don't be like Mike.
If there's one message that this episode should give you, don't be like Mike. All right. We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.